side of things, because that's kind of important. And who else do we have? Cedric Creech, welcome to our channel. Thank you for joining us. And Eric with a K here. We are his third favorite show, people. We are number 3. A good way to support this show, everyone, is to hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, follow us on social media. We'd greatly appreciate the love and support. If you want to wear our swag, just go to our website, spacedoutradio.com. We got it all there for you. Mennonite Abe and the gorgeous Kim Jellin, welcome back to the show. And we are about 30 seconds away from rocking this thing right out into the stratosphere. Thank you, Science Bob, for kicking off the Super Chat tonight. The Super Chat is a wonderful way to support what we do on this show on a nightly basis, so thank you so much for taking the time. We really do appreciate that. All right, guys, let's fire it up. We got about 15 seconds to go. I'm pumped up. I hope you guys are pumped up, too. I'm over my jitters, and we're going to make this happen. How embarrassing this is that Homer Hickam is seeing me get a little verklempt. Horns up. Let's rock. From the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We got a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot. Read Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. What a treat we have for you tonight. The man, the myth, and the Rocketeer legend. Homer Hickam is an author, Vietnam War veteran, and former NASA engineer who trained the first Japanese astronauts. His 1998 memoir, Rocket Boys, which also became the movie October Sky, was a New York Times bestseller, and of course went on to a very successful career in the movie industry as well. Hickam's body of written work also includes several editions of best-selling memoirs and novels, including the Josh Thurlow historical fiction novels, his 2015 best-selling Carry Albert Home, the somewhat true story of a man, his wife, and her alligator, and in 21, the sequel to Rocket Boys titled Don't Blow Yourself Up, The Further Adventures and Travails of the Rocket Boy of October Sky. What a legend we have here. A proud veteran as well. And joining us as well, Dr. Bob McGwier, a.k.a. Science Bob, is here as well. And Bob, I know for a fact that you're very, very happy with old Davey tonight, saying, hey, Bob, come jump on the train for this one.
Oh, I'm super happy, Dave. Very glad to be here with Homer. I mean, look, it's Hokie time tonight, buddy. It's Hokie time. Go Hokies!
Well, that's true. And by the way, you just saw my camera shake. It's because I alerted Dave in the pre-show. We are feral cat rescuers. So if you hear a meowing in the background and a cat walk right in front of me, that's what's going on there. Plus, one of the cats is deaf. And so his meow is especially loud, and yelling at him doesn't help for some reason. So, but what a pleasure to be on with you tonight, Dave, and Science Bob. Yeah, go Hokies. We're both Virginia Tech Hokies. I was there a lot earlier than Bob was, but it was certainly a great engineering school, a tough engineering school.
Mr. Hickam, I want to know from you. I mean, you're a man who has seen a lot of things in your 78 years of life, and I pulled that off my head because my mom's a 1943 edition, too. That's a pretty good year. I'm not going to lie. It's a very good year. I mean, with all of your accomplishments and everything that you have done as a NASA engineer, as a highly successful author who, by the way, for people who don't know, literally started his career at the same time Tom Clancy did. I mean, is there anything left to accomplish? I mean, you are just all over the place.
Well, Dave, I wouldn't mind putting a bookend on my life by going into space. People used to ask me, had read Rocket Boys, saw the movie. Sometimes the kids would come and say, "Did you fly into space?" And because they wanted me to be an astronaut, and I'd have to say no, but I'm not dead yet. And that was before this revolution that we've got now in space flight, where people are going into space. A lot more people are going into space. Blue Origin with their New Shepard, and of course Elon with his Dragon, and Sir Richard Branson with his space plane. So I don't know. I'm kind of waiting for one of those billionaires to offer me a ride, and I will definitely take them up on it.
I'll vote yes. Look, Bill Nelson and John Glenn were no spring chickens when they went up on the shuttle.
That's true. And, of course, William Shatner flew very recently, and he's 90 years old.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So he's a little bit ahead of me there. So I think I can handle it. I still go out to Montana every year and out there in the Badlands, and which looks a lot like Mars, by the way, and hunt the wily dinosaurs. So I think I'm still in fairly good shape where I could take a little flight.
What would it mean to you to go into space? Let's say Jeff Bezos called you up and said, "Homer, we have a ticket for you on one of the Blue Origins, and we want to take you up as a memento to an illustrious career that you have had." What would that mean to you to be up there to touch the great hands of God?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was very impressed by what Bill Shatner said when he came back about seeing how thin that the atmosphere was, and then the darkness and the emptiness of space, and he was really impressed by that, and I would be too. What I would want to do is to look out that window. I'm not interested in the weightlessness and playing with my food or anything like that. What I want to do is to be able to look out there and see the great beyond. And so I would probably, my other passengers would probably be kind of disappointed in me that I didn't want to do a lot of flips. And so I'm a scuba instructor, and I've also been on the old Vomit Comet, the KC-135, many times. So I got weightlessness. Okay, that's wonderful. But what I really want to do, and that's why Mr. Bezos made those windows so big in the New Shepard capsule, is I want to look out that window. I want to see that very thin atmosphere, and then I want to see the great beyond there. I want to just absorb that and take that in. And I also want to do it for all the NASA grunts that maybe didn't get a chance to go into space. And there were a bunch of us that gave away our lives, really. To see the astronauts go into space, and I'd like to represent them.
That overview effect is just really pretty amazing. I mean, it seems like it's absolutely universal to people who've gone and looked through that window at the Earth, whether it's the cupola or the New Shepard or the big cupola, as we saw in Inspiration 4 with SpaceX. It's got to be a thing, and I don't think I'll ever be able to go, but I probably will try to do a virtual reality or something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure glad that they put that cupola in the International Space Station. It was kind of surprising in a way that got through, because that's simply mostly for the astronauts to be able to have a great view of the Earth, and that's the direction it's mostly looking. From training the astronauts and going up, mostly when you're up there inside the International Space Station or inside the shuttle, you see a lot of reflection back. So it's very difficult to see the stars or anything like that. So what you really want to look at, and what really they remember, is not looking out so much as looking down. And as you say, get that overview effect and see how really, really thin the atmosphere is. We were talking about climbing when they talk about climbing Mount Everest, that's on a mountain. You're up in a jet stream, and there's not much atmosphere left after that. So we're really in a very, very enclosed space, and it doesn't take much to leave this atmosphere and to be in that great beyond.
Everyday ordinary people can go up Pikes Peak, and you run around a little bit up there, and right quick you've left most of the atmosphere behind you because you get lightheaded and dizzy. Yeah,
well, I get that when I go out to Montana, and it's not that much higher than here in Huntsville, so I get that. Now, I did get to fly on the Concorde twice, and so I've seen the curvature of the Earth. And gone Mach 2, but there I am sitting with the champagne glass in my hand, watching the Mach meter count up and looking out the tiny little portholes that it had and seeing the curvature of the Earth. That was a thrill, and I thought that would be, the highest altitude I would ever get. And so who knows what will happen? If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I think things occur in our lives that are meant to be. And I'm just riding that rocket called life right now.
I bet a lot of our listeners don't know the early story, the one you captured in Rocket Boys and then put into the movie October Skies. Tell us just a little bit of that history. I really want to spend as much time as we can talking about the new book, but give us some of that history to get people prepared.
No, I'm happy to talk about it. And when I go over... I'm on the board of Space Camp, and when I go over and talk to the young people and talk to the teachers, I mostly like to talk to the teachers because I get more bang for the buck out of that. I start back and remind them what life was like in the United States in the 1950s. And you can't really understand our movement into space without really understanding the Cold War, because that is what precipitated it. That and the technology that came out of World War II. With the A4/V2, that the Von Braun team. In the 1950s, it's represented these days as the golden age of rock and roll and happy days, right? But in fact, it could be a pretty scary time. The Russians and the United States were armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons that were aimed at each other. We had bombers in the air all the time, orbiting with nuclear weapons in them. We had the crews ready to go at a moment's notice to fly across the North Pole to the Soviet Union and drop bombs on them, and they had bombers ready to do that. And then this idea of building these intercontinental ballistic missiles started, which were unstoppable. So it was a very scary time. And but you know what? It was not only the golden age of rock and roll, it was also the golden age of science fiction. And so I was one of many, many, many young people at that time who were raised on Isaac Asimov and Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke. So, in a wonderful way, we were primed without realizing it for what was about to happen. And that was when the Russians, our big enemy, our big scary enemy, launched the world's first Earth satellite. And it was like the Russian bear took a great big sledgehammer and hit Uncle Sugar right between the eyes. It scared everybody to death. Because it wasn't like you look back on it now, this wonderful scientific achievement. It was a very, very scary time. But even though the Eisenhower administration tried to keep it low-key, they were really freaking out. A lot of Americans were really freaking out about this ball that was going around every 90 minutes and crossing over the United States many times every day. We young people, most of the young people, I think, who had read all this science fiction growing up, were really enamored by this. And we never thought that would happen in our lifetime. We never thought that there would be instruments in space, and we certainly never thought that there would be people in space in our lifetime. That was way on down the road. And so when it did happen, a lot of us were enamored by this and impressed by this and somehow wanted to be part of that. And I was one of them because I was a science fiction reader. And when I heard that that this thing everybody was talking about, Sputnik, was going to fly over the little coal town where I live, Coalwood, West Virginia. I told my mom I was going to go watch it fly over, and she told the neighbor lady who told the neighbor lady who told the neighbor lady, and I think the message got kind of mixed up, and a lot of people in Coalwood thought they could only see Sputnik from my backyard, and so that night, my dad, who was the mine superintendent, came out and said, "Elsie," that was my mom's name, "Elsie, why are all these people in our backyard?" And they said, "Well, they've come to help Sonny," as I was known then, "watch Sputnik fly over." And Dad said, "Well, they can all just go home, because I don't believe that President Eisenhower would never allow anything for Russian to fly over West Virginia." Well, Eisenhower, unfortunately, was not in charge of laws of physics, and Sputnik did show up. And I was totally, utterly impressed by this. I'd never seen anything like it before. And you got to remember, back then, and still today, where I lived, McDowell County was a really, really dark place. Bob, if you want a really, really dark place to look at the stars, McDowell County, West Virginia, where I grew up, it's a coal sack, if you will. And so we could see this satellite very, very clearly. And I was totally, utterly impressed, enough that I definitely wanted to be part of this. And that's why I told my parents around the kitchen table one night, I'm going to build a rocket, because that's the only way I could figure out how to be part of this. And my dad, he never paid much attention to anything I was saying. He loved the firstborn, Jim. He was the perfect son. I was kind of the emergency backup kid, if you will. And but my mom took a long look at me and she said, "Well, don't blow yourself up." And so, to my mind, that gave me permission to start this, what took place over 3 years, gathering in 5 other boys, including the prototypical nerd of all time, Quentin Wilson, who was a genius, an absolute genius. And we ended up building some really sophisticated rockets and going off to the National Science Fair and coming back with gold and silver medals. So that's kind of the crux of the story.
It's a great story. So do you feel that October Skies, the movie, portrayed the quiet nature of your father correctly, and did it portray your relationship correctly, or was it overblown for the movies?
Well, no, I mean, Chris Cooper did a fantastic job, and I think, I'm very careful about saying, well, this happened and that happened or didn't happen, compared to the real story and what's in the book and what's in the movie, because the movie tells a really, really super story, but it's a different art form from a book, from a memoir, and it can't bring in all of the different things that happened and why they happened and so on. I think it tells a very, very good story. I think Chris Cooper did a really, really good job of capturing my dad. He's a consummate actor, and he talked to me quite a bit about my dad and tried to, within the confines of an hour-and-a-half movie and the script, to bring in the worries that my dad had to contend with at that time, while contending with this all of a sudden second son who was doing things just that were totally different from anything that he'd ever known, and definitely anything that had ever happened in a little town like Coalwood.
So was the teacher a conflation of multiple people, or was there this one teacher that you would like to call out and tell us about her influence on you?
Well, Frida Riley, that was the character that Laura Dern played in the movie. And Frida Riley is now an icon to teachers around the world. And when I do go out to space camp in the summer, we have teachers that come there on scholarships. And they all, of course, want to talk about Miss Riley and what kind of person that she was. And I thought Laura Dern captured her pretty well. Except that the real Miss Riley certainly understood calculus and differential equations. She had no problem with that higher math or physics or chemistry or anything else. She was a valedictorian of the high school, Big Creek, where I went, and then valedictorian at Concord University, where she went. And so she came back to Coalfields to teach these children, and it was her opinion that sports was all wonderful and good, and Big Creek High School, where I went to school, was known as the big football school and had all kinds of trophies and everything. But she thought that there ought to be something in that trophy case that the other boys and girls, the one that were interested in math and science and studies, should have some sort of award in there too. And that's why she encouraged us. I was reluctant, but she encouraged us to go to the science fair. So we really went to the science fairs for our Miss Riley, who came down with Hodgkin's disease during all of this. And at that time, Hodgkin's disease was not curable. And she knew that her time on this earth was going to be, unfortunately, cut short. But she loved her Rocket Boys. And ultimately, what we did in terms of the science fairs was definitely for her.
There you go. That's terrific. So I had 3 great teachers. They really changed my life. I was in a town of 1,500 people in southwest Alabama, where it's also coal black every night, and except that down there it's pine trees and not coal. Okay, so one of them was a math teacher, one of them was a science teacher, and one of them was my English and English literature and Spanish teacher. They literally changed my life, because you just don't know what you're going to do in a small town like that. And we didn't have a college counselor. I didn't know where to go. I made this unbelievable score on the ACT and never knew what it meant. So, they were amazing. And, now I've got a doctorate in math and a degree in engineering and all this other stuff. And I totally attribute it to those great teachers having this big influence on me. And along with you, my mother was a central character. She was the person that encouraged me to be an adventurer and explorer and try out all sorts of things. And so I became a ham radio operator when I was 10 years old, with local townspeople help with her encouragement, and that really set the North Star for my life. It was great. It was mothers and teachers deserve all our praise.
Well, they do, and fathers for putting up with the likes of us too, I suspect. Again, I love going out to space camp and talking to these teachers, and they love their students, and they're there, and a lot of them, they're not all science teachers. Some of them are English teachers and coaches and that kind of thing, but they're out there trying to develop this or to gather in this information about this new world that students are about to enter, that includes now space flight that is going to be routine. And so, but I think it's really important, and I always like to bring in that Cold War history to them to know where it really, really started and how it has evolved. And it's been a start-stop really exercise. I mean, after Apollo was essentially canceled for the lack of interest, if you will. I don't think necessarily by the American people. Yeah, Vietnam was going on. I was all involved with Vietnam at that time, so I was hardly able to pay attention to Apollo myself. But then reflecting back on it, we can see a great big empty period there in the 1970s where, we flew Skylab and we were developing the shuttle, but not much was done in terms of popularizing the idea of actually going in and homesteading space. That I'm happy to say, I mean, right now it is, again, this is the new golden age of space flight. The first golden age was Apollo, and kind of a little bit of silver medal was Hubble Space Telescope because that was a big deal that we did the Hubble, and I was honored to be on the team that trained the astronauts to go up and fix it.
Mr. Hickam, I'm going to get you to hold on right there. I'm going to get you to hold on right there. We're going to go to a commercial break here at the bottom of the hour. Homer Hickam, the Rocket Boy. next on Spaced Out Radio. Sorry about that, sir.
No.
No, we're going to have fun tonight. My favorite part of the book, of the new book, is you're quoting your mom early and late, saying, "Don't blow yourself up," and "I told you not to blow yourself up." I can't wait to get to those parts.
Well, yeah, it's but it is fun to, and I know, Bob, that you're interested in the Hubble as well.
Oh yeah, big time.
It's fun to talk about that and how well all that's turned out and how it almost was a disaster. And also, we've got the web coming up too. You know,
Yep.
so we're all on pins and needles about that.
I'm on my hands and knees and palms pressed together and begging because look, the Ariane 5, it has not been perfect.
Nope,
it has not.
No, it could start south right there. Hopefully not, but yeah, it would be flying on a Falcon, either a Falcon Heavy or maybe the Falcon 9 could get it up there. I'm not sure.
Don't have a big enough fairing.
Yeah, well, or maybe the Vulcan. The ULA could get it up there. But anyway, it wouldn't be the Ariane 5 if we had to choose now.
Yes.
And so, but they offered, and we thought it was a good bargain, and so we'll keep our fingers crossed on that. And then, of course, the web is an origami project. Oh, so it all has to unfold absolutely perfectly, and it's going to be it'll take, I think, 2 or 3 months before we really know if it's.
So I was the kind of a lead engineer, or an engineer on a dozen spacecraft. And one of the constant things was zero out anything possible that's a moving thing. If you're going to make something move, try to get rid of it. And they've got 350 things that have to move and work perfectly, or nothing works.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's going well. I know engineers here at Marshall Space Flight Center who started as coming in their first year, started working the web, and now they're retiring, just as the web is starting to fly. If that gives you an idea of how long they've been building. We wouldn't build it the same now, of course. We'd probably build a lot of smaller. Telescopes all by themselves and kind of cluster them out there.
Absolutely.
Don't mind my silence here. I'm just enamored right now listening to you guys chat.
We could have a smaller telescope for each one of those mirrors and concentrate them. How do I know that? Because Hawkeye 360 takes radio satellites, and we've concentrated multiple of them together in a cluster, and we have this like humongous effective antenna because of the way we've doing it with small spacecraft conglomerated together. And the same thing would work, except with light it would be coherent. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, if they pull it off, it will be amazing. The next one that they do will not be this big.
No.
It won't need to be this big.
Or maybe we'll put it on the backside of the moon.
That would be even better.
What I would like. You've got some dust problems there, but we could solve that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Amazing listening to you guys right now. Amazing.
I'm loving it.
It's just what is possible right now, Dave, is just amazing with all this lift capability that we have now, and the probability of success with these new rockets coming out. And I hope we don't squander it. And I hope that because if I had to put us in historical context right now, I think we're between Columbus and Cortez. But we got to get there where space really starts paying off.
Yeah, I think if a Starship were available, they could easily lift James Webb all the way to its destination, assembled. I mean, the people do not yet get what Starship will mean, and he is stretching the ship by 7 meters and going to put 6 vacuum engines and 3 Earth or sea level engines on the thing. I think he's going to be unbelievable. I want to see him pull it off. He's got a lot of stuff to get right, but I mean, that will really change things.
Yeah,
we're going to servicing mission.
We're going to get to see the Starship blow up a few times, which is kind of fun.
I'm sure it is fun
because we know Elon's just going to build another one.
Yeah,
that's
and
cool.
Fly another one.
Well, gentlemen, we got about 20 seconds here before we have to come on a break here at the bottom of the hour. So I'm going to get you guys all cozy and comfy. And I don't know about the rest of the audience listening to us on YouTube and everything right now, but I'm geeking out right now. I am so geeking out right now. I'm so happy. Here we go, guys.
My gosh. Is it possible that we could geek out Dave Scott?
Hold on. Second half hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate it. I want to remind you that if you've missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue on tonight. Homer Hickam is here, successful author. He is formerly of NASA, the Rocket Man, and the Rocket Boy. Well, now he's the Rocket Man. Science Bob is with us as well because, well, you know, this is his dream come true to talk with Homer Hickam as well. Gentlemen, welcome back. And Mr. Hickam, I want to start with you on this one, if you don't mind, because in our pre-show, I always do a phone call. And for our audience, who obviously is not going to hear that, but you talk about this, the science or space schools that you put on for, or space camp you put on for children, you know, every year. And going way back in time, Elon Musk was actually one of the students at this, I believe. And so you've known Elon Musk and his interest in rockets and outer space for a long time here. You must be pretty proud of what he's been able to accomplish.
Oh, my gosh. Elon is my hero. No question about it. It's just amazing what he has done with the SpaceX company and Tesla and all the other companies that he runs. So, yeah, I mean, Elon's pretty amazing. Just to give you, though, some quick context about Space Camp. Space Camp was the brainchild of Werner von Braun, actually. That's why it's here in Huntsville, Alabama. And so he thought he was sending his daughters off to majorette camp and cheerleading camp, and he thought, why isn't there a space camp? So that's how all that started, and it's called, actually, the official title is U.S. Space and Rocket Center. And they have Space Camp and Space Academy and Aviation Challenge, and so it has turned out, I think, almost a dozen astronauts now. Mr. Isaacman, who paid for the Inspiration 4 flight, is a Aviation Challenge Space Camp graduate. So it's really, really doing some great work. Now, how I met Elon actually was he came to adult space camp, which we also have here. And he had just sold PayPal. And so he had a lot of money in his pocket, and he was thinking about having a space company. And so he came to space camp to learn what he could learn. And there is a lot to learn here. He had already gone over to Russia, I think, and asked them to buy one of their rockets, and they laughed at him, which he didn't like very much. They're not laughing at him right now, I can tell you that. But I remember meeting Elon and talking to him, and he obviously was a very impressive young man. Already was if not a billionaire, close to it, which he was about to spend most of it on his SpaceX and Tesla company. But yeah, I was very impressed by him and a lot of the folks over there.
Elon was also an intern. So three of us ran the Hume Center at Virginia Tech in its beginning, and one of them had the company PRI, which is the precursor for a Prius, and there was a ton of battery work and things like that. And Elon had his first internship with PRI, and you can just see all of these experiences Elon had, really sinking into him, and him thinking a lot about it, because batteries and solar stuff is just everything, and the electric motors are everything in Tesla. I mean, the guy's pretty amazing how he absorbs and extends in everything he touches.
Yeah, well, Elon is a risk taker, and he would not have. I mean, NASA would have never tried what he did, and that is to bring a booster back and land it on a barge somewhere out in the Atlantic Ocean. Never. Not that NASA couldn't have done it. It just is not to have a bunch of failures for NASA right now is not anything that a federal agency wants to have happen to them. And that's what we would have to do. We would have to see a lot of crashes and burning and so on. And that's, NASA's become very conservative over the years. They're not the same organization that they were back during the Apollo days. And that's inevitable for any organization. When they start out young and fresh, and they can do a lot of things, and they did blow up a bunch of rockets getting people to the moon and making a lot of mistakes. But they're very afraid to make a mistake now. We shall see how the new Artemis program works out to go back to the moon. In a way, I kind of take credit for that. I don't know if you know or not, but the Vice President Mike Pence started the National Space Council up again after many, many years. And it turns out that Mike was a fan of Rocket Boys and also Back to the Moon, the novel that I wrote that came out right after Rocket Boys. And so there I was minding my own business like I always do, and I get a call from the White House. And, of course, I mean, your heart starts thudding. It's like, oh, my gosh, what have I done? And so it turned out to be Mr. Pence, who said he was starting the National Space Council up, and he was going to put me on the advisory group to that. And what did I think that the United States should do? And I said, like I told, if you have read Rocket Boys, I met Senator John F. Kennedy, and he asked me the same question, and I said, I think we should go up to the moon and mind the blame thing. And that's what I told Mike Pence. I think we should go up to the moon and mind the blame thing. So that next thing I know, he's at the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 here in Huntsville at the Space and Rocket Center, and he announces we're going to go back to the moon. And that became the Artemis program. Now, the way it's being designed, I don't know if it's going to be successful, the way it's designed. Right now, we shall see. I'm just happy that they've got the moon as the destination, and we'll see how it all works out.
I think Jim Bridenstine he was a bit surprising to me, given he was a firebrand congressman. But when he changed stripes and became a NASA administrator, he really shone. He shone like a bright light bulb. I mean,
yeah, it doesn't.
He doesn't get enough credit, I think, for all he did.
No, I agree. It doesn't hurt really to have a politician in being the NASA administrator, because ultimately the NASA administrator is not designing the rockets or designing the space flight or the telescope or anything else. What the NASA administrator is doing is being friends with Congress and the president and bringing in the funding, and then taking that funding and properly spending it to have this country maintain leadership in space. And Jim did a great job of that. And I think Bill's doing a pretty good job too. Again, we'll see how Artemis works out. I'm not a big fan, frankly, of its design. But as long as the destination remains the moon, let's go to the moon, let's mind the blame thing, let's live up there, then I'm pretty happy. It's going to work out. And now Elon's involved with the human landing system. It's basically the Starship. And so I see just really, really great things coming out of Artemis and out of all the programs that are going on right now.
I want to change. I want to change subjects here for a quick second, because it wouldn't be Spaced Out Radio if we didn't ask you a few questions of the woo, Mr. Hickam. So I'm going to ask you, with all of this new interest in space and what we see happening out of the Pentagon and everything, have you ever experienced anything to do with unidentified aerial phenomena, number one. But number two, what do you think of all this hype regarding UAP?
Yeah, I mean, first place, just changing the acronym from UFO to UAP tells you a whole lot right there, doesn't it? It's just like, okay, the powers that be have decided that this is going to be a more serious topic to discuss. And so we're going to see that evolve over time. I have to tell you, my first experience with UFOs was when I was a young man in Colwood, West Virginia. I was actually a teenager. And again, why things happen when they happen, we don't always know. I was actually reading a book called, guess what, Project Blue Book, and which was the original Air Force program, and still called that, or there's still a program out there. But to study reports of UFOs that started mostly back in 1947 when discs were seen over the state of Washington. So I was reading that, and I was coming back I was in the church choir at night on my bicycle, and now I'd never seen a helicopter, and there are also all kinds of power lines around this coal mining town. Obviously, you got to get a lot of power in there to run the fans and everything. And these lights came swooping over the mountain right down in front of me, so close that I could actually see a structure underneath, cross bracing, and then just disappeared. And that was my encounter with a UFO, no question about it. But I was reading Project Blue Book at the time, so maybe you can say, oh well, he didn't really see anything. He was just so enamored. I wasn't that enamored by it. I was kind of interested, but yes. So I saw something, and there have been quite a few reports of UFOs in southern West Virginia and in that area for one reason or the other. So there is something going on. There's no question that there is something, and whether it's another intelligence, I don't have the answer to that. I will say that in terms of aliens, or if such creatures exist and they've come here, I think they probably have a difficult time with our atmosphere, with our food, with everything else. I look at I've thought a lot about time and space because I'm an avid amateur paleontologist, and I spent a lot of time out in Montana and hunting the dinosaur bones. And for instance, even those creatures in the Cretaceous 65 million years ago would have a very difficult time living today. The T-Rex would be out of breath in no time at all because the oxygen content was so much higher in the atmosphere at that time. And just getting away from thinking about people coming here, then we think about, well, we're going to go to the stars and inhabit the planets. Well, those planets are going to have to be pretty specialized in order for us to do well there, because we've evolved over hundreds of millions of years to live at the time that we do, in the atmosphere that we do, and eat the food that we do, and enjoy the sun that we do. And so to me, that's all very interesting to see, or to imagine us going out and what it would be like for other intelligent creatures to come here and what they would actually be able to do here without being in suits and being encased and all that kind of thing. So I don't know. I do think about it quite a lot.
For you,
well, that and one. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, sorry, Bob. For you, Mr. Hickam, going into NASA, was there ever a topic about UFOs during your time at NASA? And the only reason why I ask that is Bill Nelson, who is now running it, is talking about his excitement about the UAPs, and he's talked to a number of naval pilots about this. But to me, it just seems a little frank that he's not looking into his own closet when we've had astronauts coming back saying there was something flying around with us.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it started with John Glenn. If you remember, John Glenn claimed he saw a swarm of lightning bugs outside his capsule. It turned out those were urine crystals, by the way. I trained the astronauts. That was my job, was to train them to fly into space, to work the scientific experiments aboard the space lab, and then later the International Space Station. So I have to say that we were almost 1,000% involved with operations. In other words, you didn't want to screw this mission up. It was so expensive. The scientists whose experiments were flying on board these things, their entire careers were wrapped around these instruments, these experiments, or whatever they were. So the focus really, in a lot of ways, for the astronauts is inward, not outward, to work that experiment to make sure that it works. It's very rare that they really get a chance to look out, and I think they do that more on the International Space Station now. But again, when you're inside, there's a lot of glare, so it's very difficult to see outside. There's also a lot of debris out there floating around, and so lights are flashing and all that kind of thing. But I think we're now going to get into this golden age where we're going to be traveling beyond the low Earth orbit, and we're also going to be including astronauts that are not so totally immersed in operations, and we'll have more time to look out and contemplate what they're seeing out there, and maybe making some sort of contact with whatever may really be out there. But we've had a couple of astronauts, like Ed Mitchell, the Apollo astronaut, who was very enamored with the paranormal and the idea that there may be other intelligence that are coming to visit us, and Story Musgrave, for instance. So there's been some astronauts that look out, but for the most part, they're mostly very operations oriented.
So no secrets. No secrets.
I don't. Well, no. No. Honestly, I wish I could tell you that there was. I sent. You got to realize, none of us look up enough. But when I'm out in Montana and I'm out there hunting dinosaurs and it gets dark and I'm out there and the campfire has died down and I look up, I see a lot of things in the sky. Satellites are crossing over all the time, and so most of us never look up. We have evolved not to be looking up. The danger is in front of you or down below you. It's rarely up above. That's why we climb up in trees. We don't like things to be above us. We're not designed to look up. And so I think a lot of things happen in the skies that we never see, and a lot of things probably happen around the astronauts that they never saw either.
I will ask you one more question, if you don't mind, then. I know Science Bob will take over. We've got about 6 minutes here. Do you believe that there is life out in the stars? And second part to that question, do you believe that maybe we have been visited?
I think that, yes, I can't imagine that there wouldn't be life out there, because there are just so many possibilities. There's so many stars and so many planets. It would be, I think the odds of not having life are vastly more than not having it. So but there's a problem. There's a problem not only with distance, and there's time. I mean, Star Wars had it right. It may be civilizations on other planets and star systems have risen and fallen because time is so important. We're in a very, very, most of us only get 78 or 80 years to live, so we're a very, very narrow slice of time. And so yes, I think that there is other life out there, whether it's intelligent life that we will recognize. I mean, we haven't even recognized that the octopi are intelligent, but in fact that they are. So we're just now starting to recognize other life forms on Earth that are quite intelligent. So it's going to be interesting to see if we recognize what's out there. Have we been visited before? I think if we're being visited now, we certainly have been visited before. And there certainly seems to be evidence that there's something out there that we didn't make. And they're flying around in our skies. So yes, absolutely. I think we've been visited before.
Science Bob, we got 4.5 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, how surprised were you, Homer, with the content of the UAP amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act? That was pretty startling to see all that stuff actually make it in.
Yeah, I always like to peel the onion on back on any kind of legislation like that, and where I'm a little bit suspicious of it. Why exactly? I mean, we're getting Space Force is starting now too. So Space Force, frankly, didn't make a lot of sense to me. The Air Force could handle that. Why do we suddenly need Space Force? Well, Republicans and Democrats lined up and went, "Yep, we need it." So what do they know? So yeah, that's interesting to me. And but getting back, a little bit to about NASA and what's in NASA's closet. NASA is a tiny, tiny, tiny agency compared to the Department of Defense. NASA depends on the Department of Defense for a lot of things, like what's in orbit. NASA doesn't know, but the Department of Defense certainly knows what's going on in orbit and all the little pieces down to the glove that some astronaut lost. So if there are aliens in the closet, it's probably going to be in the DoD closet, not in the NASA closet.
Yep. Yeah, it'd be very interesting. So I want to talk to you a bit. So tell me, before we start carving it up, what was the overall inspiration for starting the new book?
Of the new book? Well, it's, I just, they say if you write a memoir, you either are really full of yourself or you have a good story to tell. And I thought that I had more stories to tell. But I did, when Rocket Boys came out, it was such a big success. I did write a couple of what I call equals, which were another book about the Rocket Boys, and then the year when I worked for my dad in the coal mine, but not what happened afterwards, because I really didn't want to get in the way of almost the myth that was building up around the Rocket, very positive myth around the Rocket Boys. That was great. But I think enough time has passed now, and I've been encouraged over the years by a number of people who wanted to know more. What really happened to that boy after that final scene in the movie and also in the book where the father and son get together and launch that last great big rocket? What really happened to that boy after that? And so I thought it was time to tell that story. And I wanted to tell about, of course, about building that big cannon at Virginia Tech. And I thought it was important also that I write in my own inimitable style the way I experienced Vietnam and the combat there, and then everything that ultimately led up to working for NASA and the wonderful experiences that I had there about working with the first Japanese astronauts living over there for a couple of years, working on the Hubble Space Telescope repair mission, which was a marvelous thing, going inside the suit actually and underwater and going through all the procedures before the astronauts came up, and then working with the Russians on the International Space Station, negotiating with them. So I had a lot of stories that I just kind of held back till I thought it was the right time to write it, and that's happened now.
Okay, when we come back after the break, I'm going to start leading you through the book because I really want you to cover some of the fabulous stories about Virginia Tech and Vietnam and so forth. Because, Homer, I'm going to commit sacrilege in public like I did in private. This, to me, is my favorite of your books. I loved Rocket Boys so much, but I really like this one because there was a lot of good things and some luck and so forth in getting you through high school and winning the Westinghouse or whatever it was. I think it was the Westinghouse. But anyway, and then going on to Virginia Tech, the struggles at Virginia Tech, those things we really want to tell people about. Young people often have imposter syndrome, and you describe it almost perfectly for when you went to Virginia Tech. Dave?
All right, let's go to break here at the top of the hour. The legendary Homer Hickam is here tonight on Spaced Out Radio. You can find all of his books at any major bookstore, online. Rocket Boys, man, I am just so sitting back listening and loving this show tonight. Hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio with Homer Hickam and Science Bob. Next on Spaced Out Radio. Not going to lie, I'm still geeking out. Still geeking out.
Yeah, you know, most NASA engineers, Dave, don't have secret clearances. I don't know if you know that or not.
No, I do know that.
You mostly start getting that. So, NASA engineers are very operational. And they're into the design and actually the engineering required to build these spacecraft to make them work and to keep the astronauts safe and that kind of thing. I had a top secret clearance when I worked for the Army Missile Command, and then that carried over to NASA, which allowed me to go over really and negotiate with the Russians. But no, the really classified stuff typically happens with DoD, not with NASA. Where I would, the one thing I really can't talk about is when I worked at Dugway Proving Ground.
Just remember, we're still live.
I know, I hear you, and I'm not going to say, even in the book, I say, well, I went to work at Dugway Proving Ground, and I'm not going to tell you anything about it. I'm going to tell you about when I went to Brigham Young University and dated the Mormon girls. So yeah, I mean, I'm still there are some things that I just can't say.
I hear you. I know. Thanks to Science Bob there, I have a one-page dossier of the Pentagon checking me out. That's my highlight to my claim to fame to all this spookiness.
So I had TSSI and had it for 30-something years, and when Dave and I became friends and began calling each other like every other day or every day, I told him, look, Dave, the only way we can stay friends is I've got to turn your name in, and that you're a regular repeating contact, and they're going to dig. And I says, we can end the friendship, or you can put up with that. And he decided to put up with it.
I got excited, He loved
it.
Yeah, I can't wait to cross the border, because I haven't been able to cross the border since then. I can't wait to cross the border and just see if I get flagged because of it now. That's going to be kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, I hate that we can't go up to Canada, and it's tough not being able to travel around the world.
Oh, tell me about it.
Because that's what my wife and I love to do. We love to travel. And we can still go to the Virgin Islands, although we have our house up for sale down there now, as long as we get a COVID test within 5 days of going down. But, yeah, I do feel a little bit restricted these days.
Yeah, Omicron, I think, is not going to leave a single unvaccinated person alone. So it may not be as bad, or it may be as bad, but everybody's going to get Omicron because it is unbelievably contagious.
Well, I'm vaccinated, so
am I. I'm fully.
And I wash my hands.
So do I.
One of the things
I wear a mask in a crowd.
One of the things that I learned early on when I Kathy Sullivan, astronaut Kathy Sullivan, kind of took me under her wing years ago when I wrote Torpedo Junction, and then later when Rocket Boys came out, and basically said, look, we're not, and I was not, typically used to being around a huge lot of people. I mean, yeah, there were gatherings and that kind of thing, 20, 30, 50 people, but not thousands of people. And so when I went out on book tour, I was shaking hands with thousands of people and all kinds of, young people clinging to me and breathing on me and sneezing on me. I got so sick.
Oh, yeah.
I did. Yeah. That first year, I was so sick. I caught everything. And it's so I'm very careful now about washing my hands.
Unsurprisingly, the Army, with all of its biowarfare defense work, has come up with a vaccine that will wipe out SARS and COVID and maybe even the common cold. They're about to unleash it on the world.
Wonderful.
God bless the Army.
Hey, Bob, just to change topics here for a quick second. Earlier today here, right in White Rock area, which overlooks Washington State. There was a UFO/USO that went in and out of the water that was witnessed.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's...
well, you know that I've spent time on a submarine. Lots of people have seen those pictures. And you know about my experience seeing UFOs and the other things. So, look, I'm just not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. And then I saw these pictures before I retired that I probably shouldn't have seen, but I saw. And, here we are.
We got about 1 minute, guys. 1 minute.
Well, of course, as a diver, I spend a lot of time looking at the reef. And so, Dave, you were saying you were afraid of sharks. I've had a lot of encounters with sharks.
Yeah, no, not me, man.
Not me. So afraid of sharks.
Nope. There is no need. Well, Homer, I'm a meal, okay? I look at somebody like you or other people that I know who are divers. You're thin, you're in shape. Old Davey goes into like even ankle deep. I am literally going to get attacked. Literally going to be attacked. I am a meal.
Well, you know what? It's good to recognize your fears.
Oh yeah.
And even if you can't do anything about them, at least you know your limitations. So we all need to know our limitations. And
I don't have many.
I'm happy for you on that.
I don't have many, but great white sharks, I love them, but we're not going there. Hold on, guys. Here we go with hour 2.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor. Hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Hambo. Hambo is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets a password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot, reading up on Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. Tonight we have the legendary Homer Hickam with us tonight. Rocket Boys, 1999 movie, Jake Gyllenhaal, about his life story, getting into rocketry, working for NASA, spending time in Vietnam back in the day as a proud veteran, and now leading the way and leading the charge with some major, major books. His latest book, Don't Blow Yourself Up, can be found on his website, homerhickam.com, any major bookstore. And gentlemen, we are also joined, I should say, by Science Bob McGwier. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Good to be with you, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
I tell you.
Homer,
go ahead, Bob.
Homer, I wanted to, we both of us would be in trouble if we didn't talk about Virginia Tech. So right after you didn't blow yourself up in high school, you really struggled to figure out where you were going to go to college, and ultimately you decided to go to Virginia Tech. And I know it had a big impact on you because you describe it well in the book. Tell us about any of that you want to tell us.
Well, actually, it was my mom that decided I would go to Virginia Tech, and as the movie and the book mentioned, that it was clear that this boy wanted to go learn how to build rockets and become an engineer, but where would he go to school? And I didn't actually apply because I was too busy getting ready for the National Science Fair, or I was stupid or whatever. And I really kind of wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. I thought that would be a great place to kind of carve out a career in aerospace, but that didn't work out because I didn't have good eyes. And so my mom said she applied to me to go to Virginia Tech. It was the closest good engineering school to southern West Virginia. West Virginia University was on the other end of the state, up by Pennsylvania. we never could figure out why they almost put it in Pennsylvania. But anyway, it was a two-day trip to get from Coalwood to Morgantown. And so I went to Blacksburg to the engineering school there, and it was a tough engineering school. Plus, it was mostly a military college at that time. So all the entering young men had to be a member of the Cadet Corps. And it was very much like the military academy. And I liked it, actually, after I got over that first year. I had more demerits than any cadet, any freshman cadet, or rat, as we were called at that time, because it took me a while to really get with the supervision and all of the restrictions and so on. But once I got into it, I liked it. Now, the story that we like to tell, we don't want to bore the listeners, because I know there are a lot of listeners out there who doesn't care 2 cents about Virginia Tech, even though we love it and think it's the greatest school that's anywhere in the world. But what is interesting about it is that about my story there was that I ended up building this giant cannon while I was there. And the reason for that was that we used to play, our big rival used to be Virginia Military Institute, VMI. And so every Thanksgiving we played my brother had a scholarship at Virginia Tech too. He was there, and he was on the football team. He wasn't in the Cadet Corps. He was on the football team. But so every Thanksgiving, we would play Virginia Military Institute in football in Roanoke, Virginia, and they had a little cannon. They called it the Little John, and they would bring it out. And their Cadet Corps would go up in the stands, and we'd go up on the other side in the other stands, and they would fire their cannon, and then they had it all over us because we didn't have a cannon, and they would chant, "Where's your cannon? Where's your cannon?" And so one of the reasons I haven't told this story very much is it's very much like the Rocket Boy story, in that I gathered in other boys, the cadets there at Virginia Tech, 3 other boys, and we decided that we were going to build our own cannon, and the administration did not like that idea. They did not support us in that idea, but we did it anyway. And we built this giant brass cannon, collected brass from all over, including my dad's coal mine. And I went over to the industrial. That's why I ended up in industrial engineering rather than aerospace, because the IE department could cast the mold that we needed for this cannon. And so we built this thing. And in 1960, we named it the Skipper after JFK, because he was assassinated the same year that we built it, and he was the skipper of PT-109. So we built this giant cannon. I had no idea how to fire this thing. I knew that we weren't really capable to do what you really have to do, and that's to put black powder down the barrel and the wadding and all that. So I built these little bomblets out of squeeze bottle mustard and ketchup containers, and packed them full of gunpowder and put in a firecracker fuse in the top. So this was my idea to fire this cannon, and it worked. It actually worked. And so on the big day, 1963, VMI came in. They brought out their little cannon. They fired it, and they started chanting, "Where's your cannon? Where's your cannon?" And we hauled this giant cannon in, and I put the biggest charge it ever had, because I didn't think, we tested it on the golf course, and I didn't think it was loud enough. And so I had tripled the charge, and I had this massive charge. And so I threw that down the barrel. And I forgot we were in an enclosed stadium there in Roanoke, the Victory Stadium, and this shockwave went across the field, rippled up through the VMI Cadet Corps, and cracked the glass in the press box all the way on the other side of the field. And after my ears stopped ringing, I heard the chant behind me. Our Cadet Corps was going, "Here's our cannon, here's our cannon." And so I really expected everybody to come and just drag us off the field and throw us in prison, as we deserve probably. But we were adopted. I mean, this cannon became an icon for Virginia Tech, called the Skipper. They're on the Skipper 3 right now. That Skipper, the brass Skipper, is in the Cadet Corps Museum and has little lights shining down on it. There are freshmen that are required to polish it every day. So it's become a bit of a religious icon. But I did get through that school. I didn't get kicked out, amazingly enough. It was a tough engineering school. I learned an awful lot at Virginia Tech, not only about engineering, but also about leadership. And So it was very good for me to go there.
I had to look up the canon.
So tell us about the very first time you had to, how first time you marched in a snow on the drill field or something like that. I love watching the cadets on the drill field.
Well, I mean, you got to remember also that back then we wore 100% wool uniforms, Bob, and it was those uniforms were awfully uncomfortable. And can you imagine going into the big chemistry class, hundreds of students, and everybody wearing these wool uniforms? They come out of the cold because it snowed constantly in Blacksburg when I was there. It seemed like during the winter, and we would go in and everybody would be sweating in these wool uniforms. It's like a bunch of untrimmed, wet sheep in there. It stunk to high heaven. So that was kind of the atmosphere that we were in there. But you're right. It didn't matter rain or snow or whatever. We were out there drilling on the drill field and learning how to be
they would drill through. They would drill through hell, Dave, all the time. It was just amazing. Even these modern cadets, spoiled gamers, they're out there in the heck with those wool suits on, marching all the time. It is an amazing thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, you learn an awful lot. You learn what you can endure. So you have this kind of thing that most university students don't have. You have this whole separate part of your life. It does take up a lot of your time, being a cadet in a military type college situation, plus Virginia Tech being such a really, really tough engineering school. And I have to admit, thank goodness. I mean, I've gotten all kinds of awards from Virginia Tech for being a famous alumnus, if you will, and this consummate NASA aerospace engineer. But in fact, I flunked a few courses at Virginia Tech, and I'm not ashamed to say, I don't know if Dan Pletta was still there when you were there, Bob, but he taught statics when I was there. Yes. And we called him Dirty Dan Pletta. And typically 80% of his class, the first time you took it, you flunked it. And then you switched over to whatever grad student was teaching it to try to get through it. I was very stubborn about Dan. I flunked once, I flunked twice, and I got a D out of him on the third one. To compare that, I got an A in dynamics right after that. So years later, I looked up in my signing line for one of my books, and it turned out that it was the daughter of Professor Pletta. And she said, I don't know if you know this or not, Mr. Hickam, but my father used to talk about you and the fact that you had taken his class so often. And I said, well, I just really liked your dad, I guess. But I tell you what, I know a lot about statics because I was taught by the best professor in statics there was 3 times. So this sounds similar. So I had tough professors, but I always kind of took courses from the ones that everybody else was afraid to take the course from, because if you would go and listen to them, they were by far the best instructors. They were tough. They were great instructors, and I didn't try to find the easy one. I always found the hard one, and I wound up, doing well. It was great for me. It was great for my confidence. Well, that's who you remember. You remember the tough teachers. I mean, not only in college, but in high school and middle school and grade school. You remember the tough teachers. You may not have liked them at the time, but you learned. You really learned. There was a discipline there that they gave you to learn, and they were serious about you learning what they were teaching. So we should respect our tough teachers for sure.
Absolutely.
I do. I really do.
Tell us about the transition from graduating Virginia Tech and then winding up in Vietnam. Yeah,
well, what happened there was that I thought, again, I was looking at an aerospace future, so I went through Air Force, ROTC, while I was there. But it turned out that for the same reason that kept me out of the Air Force Academy, I had really bad eyes. They were like 2,400 in both eyes. And so that's like near blindness. And the Air Force, they could use pilots because Vietnam was starting to really ramp up at that time, but they really didn't need just engineers. They had plenty of those. So basically I was told, well, you need to go to the Army, or because I was about to get drafted. And so I did. I ended up joining the Army as a private E1. I went through basic training. I went through advanced engineering training, and then combat engineering training, and then combat engineer OCS, and became a lieutenant actually in the Ordnance Corps. That's why I was shipped off to Dugway Proving Ground, which I can't talk about. But while I was at Dugway, Vietnam really got going, and I was this graduate from an engineering school, from a military engineering school. I had a lot of experience with explosives at that point. I'd worked with explosives in a coal mine and building the cannon, and of course the rockets and all that. And I just felt like that I could have stayed at Dugway for my entire Army career, but I volunteered for Vietnam. I thought it was something that I should do, and that I was trained for, and that some other poor schlub shouldn't go over there in my place. So I did volunteer and ended up in the 4th Infantry Division over in Vietnam, just as things really got going with the Battle of Dak To, and then the Tet Offensive, and then later the defense of Ban Ma Thuot, the capital there in the Central Highlands. So it was a very interesting year. I spent most of the time with armored units, and I guess I just did it in my own style, if you will, and I write about that, of course, in the new book, Don't Blow Yourself Up. And I actually did get blown up while I was there by some stray artillery round that put me over in the 71st Evac for a couple of days, and then went right back to duty. A lot of people think when you get wounded in combat that it's a ticket home. No. Not normally, actually. If they can patch you up and put you back out in the field, that's fine. And I was happy being out in the field. Again, I'm a country boy. I didn't want to be on a base camp or a fire base. I preferred being out in the field, being on the road, being with the armored units. And I learned a lot over there. But I have to say that while I was in Vietnam, that I kind of got away really from the idea of working in the space flight business. When I came back, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life, and NASA was winding down. A lot of people don't realize that even when I came back in late 1968, even though Apollo 11 hadn't flown, essentially it was over. They had already canceled the later flights in Apollo. They had already canceled the Saturn V. They were just going to use what was already in the inventory, and which was a real shame. But I did not see any place where I could go work in the space business, and I didn't really know that I wanted to anymore. And so Kismet being what it was, over the years after that, becoming a scuba instructor, I did end up working for the Army Missile Command. Ultimately, I gathered, whether I was aware of it or not, I started to gather in the knowledge base and the experience that NASA just happened to be looking for, Marshall Space Flight Center just happened to be looking for in 1981, just as the shuttle started to fly. And more importantly for my career, the Space Lab was a module that fit in the shuttle cargo bay, carried experiments from not just American scientists, but international scientists, just as I came and applied on a whim to NASA in 1981 when I was actually living over in Germany and working for the Army. They needed that particular mix of experience that I had and background that I had that they wanted me to come and work on and to help design the Space Lab. And so that's how I started my career with NASA. And then I did after a while, it all came cascading back, Bob and Dave, that I was just like that 14-year-old boy again. I was absolutely thrilled, to be working in the space business and meeting all these astronauts and working with them and later training them. And so that was just a kismet thing, if you will, but it was meant to be that I did work my way back somehow to be with NASA.
Yeah, well, my intro to astronauts, and I knew Owen Garrett and Tony England and Ron Parise and several others, was my amateur radio career, working on radio that was carried on the space shuttle and radio that's in the International Space Station through my AMSAT activities, where I was one of the engineers inside of AMSAT for a long time. It's really heady.
Owen was, I knew Owen very, very well. Owen, of course, flew on Skylab to begin with, but he did have a ham operator's license. And so he did have a ham rig that worked, I think it was called the SARX, that worked on
SARX.
In Space Lab 1. And so, and also I trained Ron Parise and Sam Durrance. I trained them to scuba dive, actually, and work with them very closely on Astro 1 and 2. And so, yeah, those were great days. Space Lab is a series of missions that are often overlooked these days. And I understand that. It was mostly very, very scientifically oriented. But Astro 1 and Astro 2 were like the first space telescopes that were up there, and kind of paved the way ultimately for the Hubble.
I think Space Lab, of course, paved the way and set the tone and paved the way for the International Space Station. I mean,
absolutely.
Come on, let's give you the kudos you deserve.
Well, yeah, I mean, we started working. Space Lab was the first time where we really started bringing in internationals to our space program. So the principal investigators, it almost didn't matter where they were from. If they had a good experiment, and Space Lab was actually built over in Europe. It was a European space agency. We helped design it, but they built it over there. So it was a series of international missions, and I was very fortunate to be assigned to the very first mission that flew Japanese astronauts, and called Space Lab J. Flew on STS-47. So I ended up spending, if you added up all the months, over 2 years over in Japan, working with the first Japanese and not only the astronauts, but the Japanese engineers and managers and so on, and really getting to know them. And I have to say, in a lot of ways, they also reminded me of that teenage boy that I wrote about in Rocket Boys, and it was October Sky, because they would ask me, why are you doing this? Do you have a passion for space? Can you explain that to us? Because we do, and we want to hear it. And so I started telling the story of building these rockets as a boy growing up, and they reminded me really of this grand adventure that I was part of. That maybe for those of us who get down into the nuts and bolts of building these things, these spacecraft and the operations and the experiments and so on, that sometimes we forget that we're part, and we should be thinking about that we're part of this grand design, this amazing adventure of actually moving into space and homesteading space and understanding what's out there. So the Japanese really brought that home to me. So I was very, very fortunate to work this Space Lab, and then because I had worked internationally, that's why I was assigned to go over to Russia and help negotiate with the Russians on bringing them aboard the International Space Station, building the space station, and how to train the cosmonauts and astronauts. And believe me, they loved it when I started talking about how much Sputnik had inspired me, and not only me, but tens of thousands of young Americans back in the 1950s and 1960s, and they did not know that. So I was able to make some really, really good friends with the same men who had actually launched Sputnik. It was a very interesting experience.
That's great. Dave, take us out for this half hour?
Yeah, we're going to go out here at the bottom of the hour. We go to break here on Spaced Out Radio. What a great night. Just a fantastic night of chat here on the mighty SOR, the legendary Homer Hickam. HomerHickam.com. You can find all of his books there. Of course, his newest one, Don't Blow Yourself Up, which can be found at any major bookstore as well. This is seriously library material for your own library. Science Bob is here as well. Listening to these two guys talk Virginia Tech and rockets, man, I don't know about you, but I am absolutely enjoying barely talking tonight because of these two. Spaced Out Radio continues right after this. All right, we're clear.
Okay, when we come back, we're gonna go into adventures.
Hey, Bob, I don't know if you know it or not, but we've got a lot of the Astro flight hardware that we're putting together over in Space and Rocket Center now.
I should drive up and I'll come up. It's 2 hours.
This is what I called earlier, Mr. Hickam. This is what I called earlier. Science Bob was going to come stalk you.
Well, my nephew goes to UAH in electrical engineering, and Rich Hoffman is, of course, up there, and is one of the leaders of the SCU. So I got a bunch of stuff to do in Huntsville.
That'd be great.
I'm looking forward to come and visit.
Yeah, you should, and we'll go over and we'll look at. I'll give you a little tour of everything.
That'll be great, Homer. You know I'll love it.
Yeah, and but Sam Durant's came up for that. I missed him, unfortunately. I was out of town. I think it was on book tour. But we loved Ron and Sam. They were terrific. And poor Ron, of course, Ron passed away some years ago.
Can I tell you what? It was. I'm not going to go too far into it because I'm going to get upset. But it was rough watching Ron go because he was a ham radio buddy, and it was rough watching him go.
Yeah, and they were such nice guys too. I mean, they really were, and they were easy to train, unlike some astronauts, and they were scientists. First and foremost, they were scientists, and so they took the training very, very well, and that was before in that time. The astronaut corps was a lot more jealous of that term astronaut than they are now. And so Ron and Sam were never allowed to call themselves astronauts.
Wow.
They were payload specialists. And even though between the two flights that they had more hours in space than a lot of the guys down in the CB office in JSC, they were not allowed to call themselves astronauts. And
recently, because of Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin, the FAA gave a formal definition of getting your astronaut pin. And you don't have to be a pilot, but you've got to do some things. And they set out the criteria, and I think it's welcome.
Well, definitely Ron and Sam met that criteria.
Easily.
If I am fortunate enough, and I hope that I am, to get at least a short trip into space, I would not call myself an astronaut because it does take more than just going up and back down. I think for that to embrace that term to yourself, I would call myself a very lucky man.
Look, if you get to walk through the double yellow doors and walk down and get in a car and you go and do science while you're up there or something like that, I think you'd earned it.
Well, I don't know. Is crying in space considered a scientific endeavor?
I don't know. Maybe if they measure the salinity of your tears.
And that's funny because I flew on the KC-135 a lot. Like I said, the Vomit Comet, and we did have some of our flyers cry for various reasons. And do you know the tear ducts has pressure behind them? The tears actually will come out like that. That's pretty amazing. So you don't ever see astronauts crying, but it's interesting to see that. Well, actually, I was up there flying frogs. And I wrote about that a little bit.
Yeah,
the
that's
frog embryology experiment.
Oh, yes, great.
African clawed frogs.
I love it.
That was
my
fun.
Goodness, I love this book so much, Homer. It's just awesome.
Yeah, so Dave, African clawed frogs, you talk about aliens. They will kill anything and everything, including probably small children. They're these predator type frogs, but they were perfect for this experiment that we were having, and they kept them in these enclosed laboratories out in California, and the astronauts wanted to be trained to the last day, so I convinced them to let us have several African clawed frogs and promised that they would be well. And we lost one the very first night we had. And it was like, oh my gosh, my career is definitely over. It wasn't my fault, as always. I wasn't there when it happened. But I did find that little girl. She was underneath the refrigerator in the break room.
Well, that's
a little
nice.
Dehydrated, but otherwise.
Give her some water.
So.
All right, gentlemen, hold on 1 second here because we are going to come back here momentarily. And about 2 seconds. Second half hour, or second half of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate it. Want to remind you that if you've missed portions of this show or others, all of our archives are free. Check them out on the podcast or on YouTube. We really appreciate that. You can check out our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bubblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue on tonight with the legendary Homer Hickam. He's got a brand new book out called Don't Blow Yourself Up, The Further Adventures and Travails of the Rocket Boy of October Sky. And, of course, it can be found at any major bookstore or on his website, homerhickam.com, and his fellow Virginia Tech alumni, Science Bob McGwier, hanging on out, talking rockets all night long. Mr. Hickam, I want to start with you on this one because you mentioned earlier in the show, and you mentioned in your book, how you trained astronauts for flight. You never got to go into space. You never qualified to be an astronaut, and I don't even know how that begins or ends. It's so way above my pay grade here. But I want to ask you, did you ever, when you were training these guys to go up in space, did you ever just feel that jealousy or that heartache that, you're like, damn it, I could do this. I want to do this. And yet here I am training these relative newbies who don't even know what the hell they're doing. And they're going to get the opportunity to live my dream. And I'm not going to be able to do that.
I'd like to say no, but the truth is yes. I thought many, many times as I was training some young knucklehead how to do some experiment. Well, just let me go because I know everything about this experiment already. I can just go and do it. But in fact, the truth is, of course, they've had to go through a great deal of work just to be at the level. Most of them were PhDs. I did not have a PhD, and or they were test pilots and had a long aerospace background. So they were the type of young people that the astronaut office felt that they needed to fly into space, and not somebody like me at that point. So I never applied to be an astronaut. I was not perfectly, but pretty much happy training them. And also, again, I was a scuba instructor. I had a number of lives going on. I was diving on these shipwrecks and writing about it and working on my literary career. So I had plenty going on in my life. But, yeah, sometimes I just wish that I could have, find a little slot in the middeck there in one of the lockers, just kind of crawl in there and do that. But I have to say that I did get a lot of very, very positive feedback. The fact that my crews did go into orbit, they did perform the science experiments, which were very, very important. We talked about earlier. Some of these experiments, if they didn't work, then these scientists who had designed these experiments, their whole career was down to tubes, if you will. They had to work. and these astronauts had to know the science background, had to know how to operate these things, and again in a very difficult situation that we couldn't necessarily emulate that well on Earth, in that we can't, except for underwater in the spacesuit, the EMU suit, you can't emulate what it's going to be like in a weightless environment. You can come close and do a lot of things, like we would have special chairs for them to sit on, like that would maybe kind of emulate their posture while they were maybe working in a glove box and that kind of thing. So again, it just wasn't an easy life to be an astronaut. It's very, very competitive. A lot of times they had to wait years and years and years before they even got assigned to a mission, and so they rode the desk an awful lot. Where I was working constantly, going out to principal investigator sites, the scientists, the PIs as they were called, and working with them, working very closely, getting to go to Japan and Russia and Germany and everywhere else. So I don't think I would have traded my career for theirs, but yes, I would have happily gone with them if I could.
Well, you mentioned one of the to me the more fascinating sectors of partitions in the new book. I was utterly ignorant about what a serious scuba diver you were and so forth, and you had lots of adventures. Tell us how you got into that, and then describe some of these wreck diving adventures and anything else you want to tell us.
Well, yeah, and I can also talk a little bit about the instructor that mentored me.
Yeah.
And this gets back into space. I learned a little bit about mostly the wrong method of diving in Puerto Rico. I was assigned as a reserve advisor down there, and I got out of the Army and came back to Huntsville, Alabama, working for the Army Missile Command. But I was missing something in my life, some great passion, and I remembered the diving that I did in Puerto Rico, and I thought, that's something that I love the ocean, and I love the idea of being a scuba diver. And I was there in Huntsville, Alabama, in a tiny little shack, was a company called Aquaspace, and it was headed up by a man named Cliff McClure. And Cliff McClure was one of the original man-high pilots. Now, as we know, the first astronauts were the Mercury astronauts, the Mercury 7, but were they? In fact, there was another program before Mercury called Man-High, and Man-High was where these test pilots went inside gondolas that were almost shaped like the Mercury capsule, and Mercury capsule was very influenced by these gondolas that under balloons that took them up to 100,000 feet or more. And Cliff McClure was one of those man-high pilots. So Cliff taught me to be a scuba diver and a scuba instructor. He taught me not only the proper way to dive, but also all the technical stuff that was behind it, Boyle's law, pressure and volume vary inversely, all the compressed gas laws, everything, the decompression requirements and so on. So he gave me really immersed me in the technical side of scuba diving, but I loved it. I had this passion for it, and I ultimately became an instructor for Cliff and for Aquaspace. And that other life that I had, beside being an engineer, was a writer. And so I started writing. This was in the 70s, early 70s, when scuba diving was just really getting started as a sport. I started writing about my adventures scuba diving down in Honduras and also diving on wrecks. So I kind of became known as this writer who could write about shipwrecks and do all the history of whatever ship he was diving on. And that's when I found out about the German U-boat 352 up off North Carolina that had been discovered 30 miles off of Hatteras. And why was it there? And I was one of the first divers who dived on it, 110 feet of water, Type 7C U-boat. And when I looked in the conning tower, what I thought was a bowl I picked up, and it was a human skull. And I realized at that moment that something had happened that I didn't know anything about, and I really wanted to know. And that ultimately led me into research over a 15-year period, the great battle that happened off the East Coast during World War II. And that was the book that ultimately was called Torpedo Junction. So I had that side to my life that was going on. But also when I started working for NASA, I had all of this background in diving and knew all of this, the engineering behind diving equipment and so on. And so NASA was very interested in me working also in the neutral buoyancy simulator, which was at Marshall. And that was a 40 feet deep, 75 feet across tank of water that actually Werner von Braun had snuck by Congress to build. And there I worked as a safety diver, utility diver, whatever was needed, and also inside the extravehicular mobility unit EMU suit as well. And all of us were engineers that worked in the tank at that time. We were all volunteer engineers who did this when we could get away from our other jobs or really needed for a mission. So we were engineers actually working with the astronauts, and that really came in handy. And also very familiar with EMU suits and working with foot restraints and tethers and all that kind of thing, which really came in handy when the Hubble Space Telescope was launched, and it was discerned that it had a spherical aberration in a mirror, and it would have to go up and be fixed. And that was probably one of the lowest ebbs for NASA at that time. Jay Leno called it the Hubble Space Paperweight. And NASA's future just was possibly going to be, destroyed at that point, because we had promised so much with the Hubble, and now it wasn't working. But the wonderful engineers and scientists up at Goddard Space Flight Center raised their hand and said, we can fix this. And they came up with the CoStar instrument to fix it, and then came down to Marshall, where we had the tank and our engineers, and then Story Musgrave, Kathy Thornton, Jeff Hoffman came up, and we trained them to go up there and fix it. So I think that was NASA's finest hour after Apollo. Really.
Oh, so tell me about how many hours Story, who I've met a few times, and all the others, Kathy, et cetera, spent in that tank training to do those repairs. It must have been hundreds of hours.
Yeah, well, what Story wanted to do and what he required was an end-to-end run. He had met Dorothy Hamill, the Olympic ice skater, and was really enamored by her. And the fact that how many times she had practiced her routine, and she never practiced it in little segments. She practiced it end to end. And so Story came up and said, I want to do these runs. We're going to go out and fix the Hubble, but we're going to go underwater for 6-8 hours. And we're going to go from like the beginning to the end of it. That's the way we're going to train, just like Dorothy Hamill does. And we weren't really set up for that. What we did was we pumped just air down into these suits, and so they were breathing air at ambient pressure. So if you're at 40 feet, it's like 2+ atmospheres of air, which meant that you had a limited amount of time that you could be down there without risking the bends, decompression sickness. So that meant that we, to meet Story's demands, and it was a good one, we had to figure out how to use mixed gas, which we had never done before. And so we started using nitrox, which is a highly oxygenated gas. And the problem, and that allowed us to go end to end, but the problem was then you had a very highly oxygenated gas under pressure, more pressure than you had. The spacesuits are around 5 pounds per square inch. So if you're down to 40 feet, your suit is actually compressed 2 atmospheres, around 30 psi, so 6 times what it would be in space. So that means that you got 6 times more oxygen molecules inside your suit, which means the slightest spark, you're going to catch on fire. And so that was a very dangerous situation, and we had to prove it. And the way we proved it was not putting the astronauts in the suit, but putting idiots like me and us other engineers who didn't really believe that there was the likelihood of a spark, and were willing to go under and test out this nitrox system. And we did. And Story got all his hours. Oh my goodness, hundreds of hours underwater training for that first repair mission, and it just as Story wanted, it worked perfectly when he was up there.
Everyone remembers the fantastic, beautiful, unbelievable photographs, and I love my favorite picture is the one where they pointed it at the darkest, blackest place they could on the sky and let it take for hundreds of hours, and it was full of galaxies.
Yeah, not stars, galaxies.
Way out there, 12.5 billion light years away.
Yeah,
Dave,
I think that area. Didn't they call that the coal sack?
They called it. I'm not sure it was a coal sack. I just knew it was one of the blackest spots.
Yeah, it was an empty spot in the sky. It's like, why aren't there stars there?
Yeah, it was amazing.
And
Dave, I think it's time when Homer entertains some of our follower questions.
Everybody,
I'm sure there's a load of them.
Well, there is, but everybody's just really into the interview right now. I think we keep going, man. I keep going.
All right,
we're all geeking out here on YouTube right now. That's
good.
But
okay.
but Joe does have a question. Joe does have a question. Joe in California is asking, Mr. Hickam, when do you think the United States will be sending people back to the moon?
Artemis, the requirement for Artemis was to send people, Americans, back to the moon by 2024. I don't think there's no way that we're going to meet that. It was way too optimistic from the very get-go. I do think that we have the capability of doing it by 2026. I hope that we keep the political will to do it, because just as with Apollo, there were failures along the way. And for that, I think that what we really need is to understand our purpose in doing this. It's not flags and footprints and to beat the Russians or the Chinese or anything like it once was. It's now to go up there and live and do work. There's good work to be done on the moon. There's interesting resources on the moon. So I think we have to approach this in a more workmanlike way, if you will, than we ever did with Apollo. So it's very important that we get up there and establish a foothold on the moon and just start living and working there. Probably with at first a station sort of like our South Pole station in Antarctica, and then we can branch out from there. So I don't want to make this. I hope it's not going to be just flags and footprints, because that didn't work with Apollo. Once we had done it, we didn't go anywhere for a long time. So we'll see.
I don't think it hurts that we are in competition with the Chinese, but it also helps that we're finding a lot of water in the bottom of these craters. We know there's helium-3 all over the place, and there's just so much that can be done there. If we're not looking long-term stay, it's just wrong. I agree with you, Dave.
No, it definitely is wrong. And I've seen some folks sometimes say, "Well, we're training to go to Mars." I hope that's not true. We'll get to Mars eventually. We're already on Mars. We've got some wonderful robots up there doing some terrific work on Mars. So I'm no real hurry necessarily to get humans up there, and if we do, and to leave the moon behind, because the moon is our 8th continent. It was carved off the Earth billions of years ago by probably a Mars-sized planet that bashed into early Earth and spun off and became the moon. If it wasn't for moon, we wouldn't be around. That caused the tidal action and with the ocean and everything else that we know about the world. Really, the moon has caused that. And so, but anyway, it is our 8th continent, and it is one that we need to get out and explore, and also start using the resources there. And I think it's fair to say, well, why are we spending all these billions of dollars in space? That's a fair question. And because I think the answer is trillions of dollars, trillions and trillions and trillions are going to come back from the resources that we find on the moon and beyond. And I think that message needs to be talked about a lot more than it is right now, that, we're just going to the moon, we're going to repeat something like Apollo. No. That's not the plan. We're going to go up. It's not my plan anyway. I'm going to try to get all our politicians and everybody else on board with the idea that we're going back this time to stay and for a purpose, not just to be like a tourist there, but actually to go back and stay and do it for all mankind. Absolutely, do it for all mankind.
All right, question coming from Ian. Recently there was that photo taken by a Chinese rover on the moon that looked like there was a structure on the moon. Do you think that that was actual structure that was found? Ian is asking.
I don't know, Bob. What do you think? It's intriguing.
It's very intriguing. So geometrically, it looks like the Arc de Triomphe across the Champs-Élysées in Paris. That's what it looks like to me. But rocks can have weird formations. So I'm waiting. They're sending the rover. All we need to do is wait a couple of weeks because it creeps along. But if it survives long enough and makes it, we'll know.
Yeah, it is very intriguing, and you're absolutely right. I mean, you can see faces in rocks all the time if you look. And we tend to do that. Our brain looks for recognizable shapes sometime. But this does seem to be geometric. It could be the splash from an asteroid hitting the moon, and it just happens to be shaped like that. Or we'll know soon enough. And so I am very intrigued by that.
Yeah, Chang'e 4 is an amazing accomplishment by the Chinese.
It
They
is.
are really telling the world that they are going into space to stay. And
I might add that they really are more interested in the moon than anywhere else, if you'll notice. As a matter of fact, my novel Back to the Moon, and I wrote a young adult series, the Helium-3 series, Crater, was the first one in that. Those are the books that they have, besides Rocket Boys. Everybody does Rocket Boys, but those are the books that they've taken and published them in China. And so that, to me personally, and Back to the Moon came out way back in 1999. So that tells me that that's where their focus is, because they're very practical people and they see all those resources that the world's going to need.
I love that Helium-3 novel, which has got me all fired up. I'm ready to go to the moon.
Yeah.
Dave?
About a little mining town on the moon, like Colwood on the moon. So.
We have 2.5 minutes here before we have to go to break at the top of the hour. Dr. Bob McGwier, Science Bob, along with legendary Rocketeer Homer Hickam. Zark is asking, Mr. Hickam, hello from Glasgow, Montana. What types of dinosaur bones do you find? Have you been to the Museum of the Rockies?
Yes, I'm on the board of the Museum of the Rockies. Actually, that's in Bozeman. And I mostly work out in Jordan, Montana, which is in the eastern part of Montana. And that's the famous Hell Creek Formation. And the Hell Creek Formation has the remains of Cretaceous dinosaurs, which are actually the most famous dinosaurs of all. Most of the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park are actually Cretaceous, but Michael Crichton was savvy enough not to call it Cretaceous Park. But Jurassic Park, which sounds a lot better. But that's the T-Rex and the hadrosaurs, the duckbills, the Triceratops, all those favorite dinosaurs. And I've been going out there, started working with Dr. Jack Horner, the famous paleontologist who discovered really that the hadrosaurs, the duckbills, were nesting animals like birds, and he was the one. He coined the term Myosaur, a good mother dinosaur. And so I started working with Dr. Horner back around 2000 or so. So I've been going out there for 20 some years and working with Montana State Museum of the Rockies people, and also University of Washington folks out there. So and it's a beautiful part of the world, really.
Wonderful. I appreciate that. Quickly here, we got 1 minute. Apollo 11 is asking, YouTube name, I don't think it's its real name, what do you think of John Brandenburg's claims that there was a war on Mars years ago?
Anything's possible.
I'm with you, home. Anything's possible, but I don't see any evidence.
No, but it is very interesting what we are. Mars does, and I wasn't kidding, Mars looks a lot like eastern Montana, the Badlands of Montana. And seeing those striations in the mountains, very much like you see in the Badlands of Montana. Very interesting. Mars is a very interesting planet in terms of its geology. Beyond that, I don't know. We'll see.
The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter is a terrific camera. I mean, it's a spy satellite orbiting Mars, and we could see a lot of stuff, and I just haven't seen any evidence of this.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to hold you guys right there as we have both the legendary Homer Hickam and Dr. Bob McGwier, a.k.a. Science Bob, talking rockets. A great new book from Mr. Hickam, Don't Blow Yourself Up, The Further True Adventures and Travails of the Rocket Boy of October Sky. Found at any major bookstore and online. Let's go into hour number 3 next. All right, we're clear. Gentlemen, I'm just going to take a bathroom break. You guys
It's amazing how fast 2 hours goes by.
I'm telling you. I'm with you, Dave. I'm going to take a quick break.
Ditto.
All right, gents. Welcome back.
So here's my space cat.
Very nice. Hi, G. West. Thank you for the super chat, along with the Science Bob, Rex, Thomas, and Apollo. And waiting for the heavy snowfall to come. Waiting for the heavy snowfall.
We've had a very warm winter so far here.
Yeah, so here too. We were in the 70s last week.
Yeah, it must be nice.
Yeah. Well, both of us live in Alabama.
Yeah, must be nice.
Yeah.
It's supposed to get
but
to minus.
we're also in Tornado Alley, so this warm weather
my
is a little
goodness.
scary. It can
Yeah,
spin
it
up.
is. Yeah, so we had pretty violent thunderstorms last week.
Still
50 mile an hour winds. We didn't have any rotation, thank God. But and you've seen what's happened over in Tuscaloosa regularly the last decade.
Yeah, and we've been here in Huntsville. We get hit too. What happens is the cold front. It's warm, and then the cold front comes in, and that's what causes all the energy suddenly to spin up.
Yep.
So,
Well, I'll be in
Sure.
minus 22 Fahrenheit this weekend. Yeah.
so you're kind of already living on Mars, there, Dave.
Yeah, pretty much. That's why
We need
they-
a little
that-
more air. A
that's-
little more air.
That's why
A little
you-
bit more air.
That's why you guys got to send the Canadians up there.
But I absolutely agree. I think Canadians would be very well already used to conditions, very cold conditions, like on Mars for sure. So.
Well, one of my favorite astronauts is a Canadian that sings David Bowie's famous Major Tom song.
Right.
And I'd love to see that guy dancing away and singing and playing guitar on Mars.
All right, gentlemen, we got just a few seconds left. Please stick around until we go to commercial break, and I'll say proper goodnight to you. Here we go.
Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Here we go with the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do old Davey the favor. Hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Hambo. Hambo is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets a password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. For the final time tonight, we introduce our guest, the legendary Homer Hickam. His website, homerhickam.com. Yeah, you might want to check out the movie October Sky after this one. It's all about his life growing up, playing with rockets, and getting noticed for his brainiac adventures as a child. And he has a brand new book that is up. It's the addition to this. Don't Blow Yourself Up. Nice title. The Further True Adventures and Travails of the Rocket Boy of October Sky can be found on his website, homerhickam.com, as well as every major bookstore and online. Mr. Homer Hickam, welcome back. And Science Bob, welcome back as well.
Thank you, Dave.
Question coming from G. West. If you had to put your money on it, Mr. Hickam, which moon or planet in the solar system may contain ET life?
I think Titan. Titan is it's a moon, and it's not a planet, but it's very interesting in that it has oceans not of salt water but of methane. So to me, that is a very interesting place. Of course, Europa. We've all heard about Europa, but Titan has an atmosphere. And it's toxic to humans, but it may not be to other life. So I'd put my money on finding life on Titan.
I'm going to vote for Enceladus. We've seen saltwater spray with organics coming out of the ice, a little crack in the ice. So we now know there's more water in the oceans on Enceladus than there is water on the Earth. That is how big those oceans are. So I think it's very likely that Titan or Enceladus will have life on it. And below the surface on Titan, there's ice water. So and what's going on with both Saturn and Jupiter and their moons is these are massive planets, and they have these huge tidal forces, which cause the planet to go like this, and when it's doing this yo-yo, and it's heating up the insides. Heating up the insides from the yo-yo of the tidal stuff. I think we're going. So, and the other thing that becomes clear, if we find life in the generating phosphine in the atmosphere of Venus, in the oceans of Enceladus, or somewhere on Titan, life is everywhere in the universe. That is what will be absolutely clear. I can't wait for us to find it.
Yeah, me too. And that we're in this golden age of space exploration, and we're going to find these things out. And I hope I live long enough.
I hope we both live long enough to see that happen. I hope we both live long enough to see the octocopter fly on Titan.
On Titan, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Man, I'm just excited to be talking about this. You know, I mean, I'm the weird one here because I've had ET contact. But, I mean, for you guys talking about, like, even finding microbial life, that would be a massive, massive find for humanity, would it not?
Yeah, I think in terms of our philosophy, all of the philosophies that we've known would have to take that into account, that there is other life in the solar system. And to me, I would welcome it, frankly. I'm a good Methodist boy, you know, and so raised in the church, and I believe that there's that good person looking after me and all that. But we would all have to take into account philosophically what it really means that life is other than on this planet. And what does that mean to us? But I would welcome it. I think it just means that our Creator has decided to put this wonderful possibility of life, sprinkle it all over the universe. I would really welcome that.
This Methodist preacher's kid also would like it to be everywhere. I really want us to understand that the universe was tuned for life and is full of life. If we find it in 2 or 3 places in the solar system, it's everywhere.
Yeah, and you know, NASA for the longest time just almost refused to look for life for whatever reason elsewhere. It was just like, no, we don't want that. But now all of a sudden we just see this everywhere. Everybody is just excited about this idea, and we're getting closer and closer to finding out whether we've got other life in the solar system, which, by the way, if we don't find it, doesn't mean it's not elsewhere. It just absolutely makes the deal. If we've got even microbial life on Titan or anywhere else, then, oh my gosh, the whole universe is just teeming with life, and probably, no doubt, intelligent life as well.
Yep.
What more do we have to do on this planet in order to prepare for life in space? Because to the layman like myself, who will never get to travel to space, who will never get to, you know, the majority of us will never even get to see a rocket launch, let alone travel into the stars. I mean, it is such a pipe dream that we watch and we watch in awe, but it seems so unattainable for us layman people here, you know, to watch it happen. You know, for us who are never going to experience what you've experienced, Mr. Hickam, or even you, Science Bob, what should we be looking for to keep excited about these projects, knowing that we're never going to be involved? Because people are so much in their own lane right now that it's difficult to expand our minds like the 50s, 60s, and 70s and 80s.
Well, I think put it in a historical context, we are very much like the Europeans were when the Americas were discovered. And that is, it didn't have much effect at all on your average peasant working the farms in Europe or in Britain. But it was coming. Something really, really big was coming that was going to affect them all, whether or not they ever went to the Americas or not, because there were adventurers that would go and start bringing the resources back and developing this place that Europe didn't know about. And so, I think that's, in a historical context, that's kind of where we are right now. And that it is on us who are really interested in this, and I try to do this, is to popularize this idea, to let people know who are completely immersed in their day-to-day lives, and I understand that fully, to know that we are on the precipice of some amazing new adventure where probably their children and definitely their grandchildren are going to be, if not working in space, working in and using the resources of space. So, what I look forward to in terms of going back to the moon is not the first astronauts on space. That's all, or on the moon. That's all wonderful. I'm looking forward to the first plumber on the moon, the first electrician on the moon, the first miner on the moon. That's those blue collar workers. When they get up there and start working, that's when this is all going to open up, in my opinion.
Do we deserve to go to space, though? Because, if you look at the way, and I'm not a big environmentalist, okay? I live in a logging community, in a mining community, and, I see the hard work that these people put in for paycheck to paycheck, much like your dad did in the coal mines. But, the way the Earth is changing and the way that we have treated this planet over the last century especially, do we deserve to go into space and settle on another planet or moon, knowing that we've treated this one like garbage?
Well, I don't know. That's an interesting question in terms of deserving or not. I think that we are deserving as a species because we are the result of 300 million or more years of evolution to get to be where we are, and our ancestors went through hell to get to where we are, the civilization that we've had. We've had civilizations rise and fall, and so it's not like that we just kind of coasted through all these eons to get where we are. It's the human race has really, really worked hard to get where we are, and for some reason we have evolved this brain power that is more than we really need. We don't really need all this extra brain power to be very successful on Earth, whether we pollute it or not, which I hate, by the way. So yes, I think we absolutely deserve it, and we are meant, we are designed to go out into other worlds for whatever reason. And I believe inevitably, historically, good comes out of our human evolution.
I think we're learning right now from our mistakes. Lots of technology is being developed that will help us bridge over our mistakes. You've got Tesla with the electric vehicles. You have other power sources coming online. You drive across the United States, and it's covered up across the southern third of the United States with windmills and solar panels. And we got battery storage and gravity storage and all these other things. I just think we are learning. And not only that, it's easier to do those things off the Earth than it is on the Earth. First of all, we're not going to find oil. We're not going to find coal necessarily. We may on Mars, but we may not. So we're going to have these energy sources anyway. So if we get off, we're going to be taking clean energy, clean building stuff with us. And I know some of the work that's going on to build the facilities we're going to live in with 3D printed machines using local materials. I mean, that's terrific. That means we're not taking crap up there to pollute with. I think that if you dig into it a little bit, you can see that we're going to go. The other thing I think we want to do is get out in the asteroids. And if you follow Jeff Bezos, his dream is Gerald O'Neill cylinders, in which we can have 1 million people living in a single city in space. And since it's rotating, it'll have gravity. You could have water and lakes and other things. I just think we are at the point where if we don't really have a really bad situation, we're going to have a big deal in space.
Yeah, I agree, Bob, with everything you say. And we do, it's all about education ultimately, and appreciation. Again, that's that overview effect, going into space and looking back. That really impacted, probably the biggest impact on the majority of people about the Apollo program was not the moon rocks that we brought back, but the pictures taken from the moon or in deep space looking back at the Earth and looking at how fragile it is. And so that really started a movement to start taking care of this, the only planet that we have right now. And I'm fully supportive of that. But that shouldn't keep us from also going out and gathering the resources that have been essentially given to us because of where we are on the evolutionary scale right now. That is why we have these big brains, I think, is to keep moving out. And then you can get very philosophical or very religious about it, but I think that's what we are meant to do. And
so I think everyone listening to this should go to YouTube and look for The Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan.
That's true.
If you are not moved by Carl's unbelievable poetry and that image of the Earth as a pale blue dot through the rings of Saturn, there's kind of something wrong with your head and your heart. And we have the capacity to do good. And I think we probably will if we just get through this rough period we're about to go through.
I agree.
All right, let's get to a question here from No Justice, No Peace. Mr. Hickam, will the James Webb Telescope ever be launched? LOL, but seriously.
Oh, well, seriously, yes, it will be launched. We were talking about that a little bit between shows, and that was that it's going to be flying aboard the Ariane 5, and probably not the rocket that we would pick now to do it. It's going to be not that there's anything wrong with the Ariane 5, but we've got a stable of American rockets now that could do the job, and it was picked many, many years ago. We got our fingers crossed, our toes crossed, and everything else crossed that this is going to first get to its destination and then unfold properly. And it either is or it isn't. It should not be the end of our space endeavors if it isn't. We just got to hope and pray that it's all going to work, because it will revolutionize our ability to look out to the edge of the expanding universe and probably find a lot of planets out there that may be habitable. So it will change a lot of things about how we look at space and our universe. So let's just hope that it works, and I will be praying that it will.
What happens if the James Webb satellite actually finds life somewhere else?
We'll rejoice.
Yeah, we should. It may find evidence.
Yes.
The probability that there must be life on a certain planet by being able to discern some, not features necessarily, but the atmosphere and information like that. So, yeah, I agree with Bob. We should rejoice at the idea that we found. But we got to remember, we're looking at millions and millions and millions of light years away. That's time. Light years are time. So whatever we're looking at happened a long time ago, and we just kind of wonder if we're seeing the evidence of of biology, not intelligent life, but biology on a planet, that was so many millions of years ago. How did that evolve, and where is it now?
It's the one kind of crazy scenario is if within a couple of 3,000 light years of the Earth, there is a two-sided planet, one side dark, one side light, and if we have a massive city that's lit up like, say, the megalopolis along the East Coast, James Webb Telescope will see those lights on the dark side. That's kind of crazy. That, and I just hope we find clear evidence of biology in the atmospheres of these exoplanets. I would just rejoice.
Absolutely. It will be just fascinating. And if for some reason the Webb doesn't happen, then we need to get another Webb or something like the Webb maybe that will work. And we talked about maybe putting definitely a radio telescope on the far side of the moon to look out with any kind of interference from Earth. And that'll tell us an awful lot too. So the next 20 years is just going to be amazing, the information that we're getting. But I think it's up to those of us, like you, Bob, and you, Dave, definitely to popularize all this, to really get our audience aware that things are really about to change in our world and the way that we perceive our place in the universe.
No, I can totally understand that. And sir, with 3.5 minutes to go, as this show is flown on by Mr. Homer Hickam, do us a favor. What are your plans for, going into the end of this year, which is just a few days away, and then going into 2022?
Well, our plan is just to stay home. I've been out on book tour a lot. I've been away from home too much, so I'm happy to be home. I'll be going over to the Space and Rocket Center where Space Camp is. We've got a number of meetings about that. We've got some really exciting new programs that are occurring out there. So I'll be busy with that, but I'll be in my own bed every night past the new year.
Well, you know what? It's been a real pleasure here. Any other options or things you want to say to our audience before we have to say goodnight? Well,
no, but yes and no. I mean, first off, I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you, Bob and Dave. This has been a wonderful interview, and also to interact with your audience. I think you have a very eclectic audience there, and really enjoyed your back and forth with the folks that subscribe to your channel, and I think everybody should. So thank you for the opportunity to kind of introduce myself to maybe some of the folks in your audience that weren't aware of me and my work. And it's really just been a pleasure talking to you and Bob tonight.
Well, I can tell you, imagine how I felt earlier in our conversation when you actually have listened to a number of the shows that we have done to kind of check out who's this Canadian guy who's going to be interviewing me. And I was, like I said, I was totally fangirling earlier on today and, learning about that. That just, you really warmed my heart with that one. And thank you so much. And the fact that you didn't mind that I brought in my good friend, Dr. Bob McGwier, both of you from Alabama, if you see him stalking you around your house, do not blame me. Okay, do not blame me. But what a pleasure to not only get the opportunity to talk to you, but knowing that you've listened to this show and you've actually enjoyed what you've heard.
Absolutely, and I hope Science Bob and you, Dave, will take the opportunity to come to Huntsville. And I'll be happy to tour you through the U.S. Space and Rocket Center and Space Camp and show you all the wonderful exhibits that we've got out there and these young kids learning about space and moving into space and so on. So, all of your audience, I hope they take the opportunity to come visit us here at Rocket City, USA.
I would love to take my son there. Love to take my son there.
Dave, you got to.
Oh, you know what? That's probably a plan for later on in the summers. We'll surprise him with a flight down and check that out. That sounds
Absolutely.
So much fun.
Take them to a baseball game in Atlanta.
Then go see a baseball game in Atlanta. Yeah, we're pretty close. We're a few hours away.
That works.
Space Camp is a great opportunity, and for not only young people, but we do still have adult space camp too, Dave. So come on down.
Well, there's no sharks there, so that might work.
No shark. We do have the underwater astronaut trainer. We will take you underwater, but I promise that you probably will not get bitten by a shark while you're doing it.
All right, perfect. Mr. Homer Hickam, thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio. HomerHickam.com is his website. You can check out his new books there or at any major bookstore. Thank you again, Science Bob, for this. Really appreciate it. Coming up next, we have the fedora-wearing John Hudson, who is going to take us through the unbiased UFO report. Then we have Shirky Poo's news to round out the night. We'll be back with Spaced Out Radio after this. That was fantastic. Just fantastic.
Thank you, guys.
Homer, that was so much fun. Thank you.
It was fun, Bob and Dave. It was great fun. I really do appreciate it. And so let's get together again sometime. What do you say?
I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
And Dave owes me a trip down here once we get over COVID.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, my friend,
you guys take care.
Merry
and
Christmas
again, thank
to
you so much for having me.
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you too.
Good night, Dave.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. All right, we'll send you home. There we go. Good night. Wow. Homer Hickam. That's a real deal. Amazing. Good call there, Chris Mo. I'm still shaking. I am. I don't get rattled often. I was a little rattled tonight. That was amazing. Wow. Science Bob was incredible too. I mean, just listening to those two guys, it was like two best friends who were having a cold beer over a chat, by a fire, talking about rocketry and space. Wow. We really got to see something special tonight. We really did. And the sad part about it is, it's over. Just like that. You're welcome, Science Bob. We love you, man. We absolutely love you. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Just waiting for the fedora-wearing John Hudson to join us. I don't think I could have done that interview any justice without Science Bob there tonight. Really. Blows me away. Wow. You are very...
What's up, buddy?
Oh, man. I'm going to have to replay my own show.
Oh, why? What happened?
Oh, just with Science Bob and and Homer Hickam talking rockets and space all night long. Amazing.
Yep.
Just an amazing show.
Yep. So agreed, man. So agreed. It just like you just want to just be a fly on the wall.
You know what, dude, like heavy science is not my thing, but I got schooled in a real happy way today. You know, I really did.
That's how it's supposed to be.
Friggin' schooled.
That's how it's supposed to be.
I want to say thank you to the stunning and talented No Justice, No Peace for the amazing super chat. Also to the gorgeous Pinzer, G West, the lovely G West, the attractive Apollo 11, tantalizing Thomas, beautiful Bob, and ravishing Rex for the amazing super chats tonight. I hate midweek. My throat starts to go. Here we go. We rounded third. We're heading for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate it. Want to remind you that if you missed most of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. Yes, it is time once again for the fedora-wearing John Hudson and the unbiased UFO Report. Yes, John Hudson comes in to keep us updated on everything in the latest and greatest UFO news. John, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for sticking around, especially considering I can't imagine how jam-packed your brains are right now with all that wonderful information. So thanks for sticking around.
Oh, my gosh. Listening to Science Bob and Mr. Homer Hickam talk about space and rocketry and everything.
It's so relaxing.
I mean, there are very few shows that I get to just sit back and chill and smile because I'm learning something.
Mm-hmm.
I got schooled tonight, man.
That's a good thing,
schooled, and I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, we should try to make that happen more often. That's a good thing.
And you know what was really cool about it? Is listening to Mr. Hickam actually admit that he has seen UFOs.
That was interesting. That was really interesting.
I didn't think he'd bite. Yeah. I didn't
either.
Bite.
I really didn't either. I mean that keep meaning to go back, and I want to go back and I because it's like I didn't even catch it the first time, and it was like, wait a second. But the thing is that I think obviously everything that's been going on is obviously making it easier. But I also think that this is one of the times where we start to see why the parsing of the language between observables and contact and observables and entities is actually a big deal, because when that nuance exists, it frees people like him to be able to safely say he's seen a UFO without getting immediately pulled down into the more uncomfortable conversation, which really should be the obvious follow-up conversation, but because of our wacky world, isn't at this point.
Oh, you know what? You're so right. And And, you know, we asked him some pointed questions. And, you know, about NASA and about, you know, whether or not we deserve to go into space and colonize someplace else. You could tell he was genuine. But could you imagine, you know, and I just want to say this before we get going here. Could you imagine growing up in that time, in that era in the 50s, where your mother knows you're playing with gunpowder and rockets and gasoline and everything, and the only words of advice that she has for you is don't blow yourself up, which is the latest title of his new book. I mean, in today's world, that doesn't happen. The police are called.
The world. Yeah, I know. It's hard for me not to, because that's the world I grew up in, you know. And so, I mean, I God, I think of some of the stuff that man, you start sitting down one night, like, you know, late at night and start writing down statute of limitations on things. At some point, you're like, wait a second, you know, because you start realizing that there's so many things that you got away with as kids that you couldn't get away with these days. Now, the truth of the matter is that people get hung up on this idea that those extreme examples were the only ways we could have learned those lessons. That's not true. There's 16 million different ways to learn the lesson. So, you know, just because, you know, more modern kids aren't necessarily getting that same, you know, extreme, Crocodile Dundee style, Wild West sort of approach to it, you know, there's still lots of opportunities to learn those lessons.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing. All right, let's get going here because we got a lot of UFO news to cover. And right off the bat, Avi Loeb basically saying that we're going to be rewriting history books and textbooks very, very soon.
Yeah. So first off, it's a fun article because one is it's not just Avi. It's also retired Rear Admiral Tim. I need to start beginning better practicing pronunciation. Gauliet. I'm hoping doctor. And so it is listed as opinion contributors, but it was published in The Hill, and The Hill is not a somewhere where you typically expect to be reading flights of fancy sort of stuff, right? So I was impressed where it was published as I was the article, but when you read the article, it's good because it sets a very pragmatic tone to everything. But it doesn't try to pull any punches either. It makes stuff very clear to say things like, look, if what we are seeing is as we are seeing it, and if what we believe is happening, then there is an entire aspect to physics that we don't get. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to rip out the physics we have. That's not usually how science works. It usually is additive. But there's obviously something we're missing, right? And so it was a really good. It was also a good opportunity, I think, for a more nuanced kind of nudge at the science community in general. Just specifically talking about the dogmatic aspects of it, and the ways that it hasn't done itself any favors in how it's approached this or many other topics. It's someone said it really well the other day, and I can't remember who it was. They said, it was something along the lines of, science used to be focused on the outliers, and now science actively avoids the outliers. And and I don't believe that to be wildly true, but if it was wildly true, oh boy, man, the trouble we'd be in, I can't even possibly put words to it, and so it's a really good article. I'm supposed to remain unbiased, but I highly recommend everyone check it out. It's a good article to read, and it's nice to see two gentlemen like that working on a similar article. But it definitely touches on a lot of interesting topics. All
right, the final wording of the amendment has been published.
Woohoo! Party. So no sudden. Well, the truth of the matter is that anytime these kind of publishing dates happen, you do actually have to read through them with a fine tooth comb, because people try to sneak stuff in and people try to sneakily remove things. And so it doesn't mean that no one's got any work to do, but it does mean that we finally got to a point where there is a single language set that everyone agrees with. It's all the reconciliation is done. This is what the president will receive on his desk. This is what the president will hopefully and almost certainly sign. And so it's another step in the process. But what I hope everyone's doing is I hate to sound like a teacher, but like, I hope everyone's using this as an opportunity to kind of get a little bit of a window into what the legislative process is for doing things like this, because we're going to have to do this again. We're going to have to do this several times. We're going to have to get a lot better at it. And we need to get better at it than anyone else is. And so this is a good learning opportunity for all of us.
Do we have any dates or rumors of when this bill is going to be signed by the president?
Honestly, once reconciliation has occurred, and once you've published unified language like this, where like everyone has publicly said we're in support of it, the truth of the matter is that him signing it is somewhat of a eyes, dotting I's sort of a thing, right? So my guess is that it'll just get delayed as long as is needed for some political event. They usually like to sign things like this, tied to some holiday or tied to some, announcement or some new package they're releasing or something like that. So, so there's a good chance that it'll be delayed because it's tied to some other marketing effort. But there's reason to be confident. Believe it or not, there's actually reason to be confident that we could actually see this signed by Christmas. I'm not keeping my hopes up, but there's a chance.
All right, this is the one I'm really looking forward to getting into. Is Senator Kirsten Gillibrand really, really still pushing the idea of the threat narrative of UAP, and very proud of her bill that she helped put together. I mean, this is good stuff here as she continues to build support for this subject.
No, this is what. So how do I put this? In a really contrite, manipulated, puppeteered world, right? This is exactly what you want to see. You want to see someone like her suddenly get wind under her wings, right? On something that we hope she really cared about. And I do. I really hope she did. But I don't know that for sure. I have no idea what she really thinks, right? And so she tried something. She floated at something, right? She got a lot of attention for it. She got Rubio on board with her, right? Now she's tied to a Rubio bill, right? So this has been lots of good stuff for her. What you hope happens then is they double down. The problem is that when you have something as volatile as this, sometimes that doubling down doesn't happen, and they still take a step back. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing her doubling down, and she's doubling down with a grin and a bit of a swagger, right? Which is a really good thing. It shows that she's getting confident and she's getting more sure of herself, and that she understands that she has a real pony in the game now that she can ride for a while.
That is some good stuff, man. That is some good stuff. Who's starting to support? Are we starting to see more politicians come on board with this, saying, yeah, I need to learn more about this? Or is it the public in general?
I think it's growing. It's growing because the thing is that congressional members, they're always going to work harder for things that they personally give a damn about, right? It's hard to manage an ego like that and not require everything to have a piece of you in it, right? So anytime they find something that they can personally get excited about and that their constituents want, it's like party time, right? Like they just go ballistic, right? Because it doesn't get to happen to them very often, right? A lot of times the stuff they have to champion it sucks. And so I think for this, I think that we are going to start seeing more and more and more people come out in support of it, because one, it's a bipartisan bill that you can actually get energized about, right? You can actually get like passionate about something that is not bipartisan. I can't tell you in my lifetime the last time that happened.
Well, it's interesting to see how this is going to play out, John, because we know the bill is passed. We know it's going to become legislation. We know that it's going to be, very highly scrutinized, not only by non-supporters in the political realm, but United States citizens coming around. It's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the world comes out. And I like this tweet that you posted here of Senator Gillibrand, where she tweeted out, "If we want to defend our airspace and maintain our strategic edge, we need to investigate unidentified aerial phenomena and determine if they belong to a foreign entity or something else altogether. It's a national security issue, and we cannot bury our heads in the sand." But in saying that, I like what she said, because she's defending her own bill. But where I'm a little concerned is, it seems like we've taken this backward step on going back into the threat narrative that it's Russia, it's China.
So yeah, okay, yeah. So totally see that. But I think the better way to look at this, at least my opinion, is that each individual person is on their own story arc, and everyone has to go through the threat narrative phase. It's like going through your preteens, right? And essentially, because she is somewhat newer to this than other people are, she's bumbled into the fact that if she really wants to get any kind of movement done in Congress, that there has to be a defense aspect to it. And so she's being schooled. She's being educated by others who are now saying, look, what we told you was correct, right? So now she's getting support in believing what she's been told, that essentially this is the way to do it, right? And so yeah, so I tend to be a little bit cautious, but I think I think everything's kind of on the right track.
Awesome, Mr. John.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure to have you here for the Unbiased UFO Report. A great job as per usual.
Thank you, sir. Much pleasure. Much thank you for everyone hanging out and listening in.
And we should let people know that on our YouTube channel, if you're subscribed, with John and Big Willie and Gemma Jade with the After Hours show, they will be taking the Christmas weekend off to spend time with their families. And you can't blame people for that. Even though you're stuck with myself and Lynn Wallington on the weekend as well. So, you know what? We're still providing some damn good entertainment over the holiday season for each and every one of you.
But like good younger generation people, we started a new job, put 2 weeks in, and now we're taking a weekend off.
Exactly. But your salary is right. That's the main thing.
That's so true.
Let's get to Shirky Poo's news. All right, Shirky Poo, what do you got for us? Right here in British Columbia, a mysterious unidentified flying object was seen over Semiahmoo Bay and caught the attention and imagination of some White Rock, British Columbia residents. Matt Kilbag first reported seeing the unusual object to a White Rock Facebook group last week. Kilbag, who was asking if anyone else saw the anomalies that took place December 15th, reported seeing what he initially thought was a water spout forming. In an interview with the Peace Arch News, Kilbag said the morphing object first looked like a plume of smoke or mist, super saturated, dark, low-hanging, free-moving cloud that looked like it was trying to touch down on the water to form a water spout. Up above it, there was literally circle clouds. As soon as it touched water, it would start pulling up water, and then it would collapse, and then it would disappear for a second, almost as if it would go into the water, and it would start forming again. Kilbeck said the object was about 2 to 5 kilometers out in the bay, but said he got a pretty decent look at it coming out of the water. Sounds like a USO becoming a UFO, doesn't it? It was forming like sort of funnel shape of sorts. And then it completely came out of the water, and it came out probably a few hundred feet up, and then it came back down, and it totally submerged itself and formed. It looked like a solid formation under the water. And then it started moving without making any splashes. It wasn't disturbing the water at all, but you could see clearly it was a round object that was submerged right under the surface of the water, and it was moving at incredible speeds. Now, Shannon Stewart, who also observed the unusual object, described it as really weird. There was a dark shadow moving across the water. It would then disappear and reappear, moving in the other direction. This went on for a long time. We used binoculars to look because we thought it was a whale in the bay or a flock of birds, maybe. But we couldn't see any birds, but there was something at the tip of the shadow coming out of the water like a seal or something. Asked if what Stewart observed could have been a submarine. She said no, it was definitely not a submarine. How's that? Very, very interesting. We got aliens here in BC, by the way. Major, major aliens. When historians write the book of 2021, they may not remember the 12-year-old Lego master, the Massachusetts alligator, or the cow stuck in a Louisiana tree. Fortunately, we've got some interesting news. Of course, this year's all been about pandemic, the start of the Biden administration, and the year that Samuel Adams released a beer that's illegal in 15 states, and a German inventor's testicle birth control device won a Dyson Prize. Here's a top look at some of these stories. Haddon Hayes, 12 years old, earned a Guinness World Record when he assembled the Millennium Falcon microfighter kit in 1 minute, 59 seconds. Yep, how is that? Alligator was seen spotted in a Massachusetts river swimming around. A cow was rescued after somehow it got into a tree. Don't know how it got there, but they had to use a chainsaw and prune snippers in order to get the cow out. Wow, that's kind of interesting. All right. You know, you go into the ocean with a surfboard, you're expecting to get, bitten by sharks because that's what happens. All surfers get bit or chased or something. But in Hawaii, this time it was something different. Ingrid Seipel, been surfing 35 years, was riding the waves when she thought it was a Hawaiian monk seal in the water. And when the animal lifted its head, it was a wild boar. Yep, now we got wild boar attacking surfers. Bit into her board. She didn't get bit. But nonetheless, not only are sharks going after surfboards, so are the wild hogs as well. I don't get these ocean creatures wanting to kill everybody. All right, thank you to everybody listening on in tonight. Thank you to Shirky Poo for the wonderful news, as we appreciate it. And, of course, the unbiased UFO report with the fedora-wearing John Hudson. Big thank you to Science Bob for co-hosting with me tonight and getting to know the legendary Homer Hickam. HomerHickam.com is his website, so make sure you go grab his new book. It'll be well worth your read and entry into your library. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, at work, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone in our chat rooms tonight. YouTube, Twitch, LGAB, Revolution Radio, Spreaker, Facebook, and of course on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends, we're watching. We own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Yes, the Woo train has docked for the night. But soon, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never inquire. And if you want to bring a friend, we've got room for them too. Good night.